Hello, welcome into the newest edition of the podcast. I know it's been a minute. Kind of just been waiting for enough information to do a full length episode on. Feel like now, halfway through the SEC conference play season, we've got enough to talk about. Certainly, the news that we're first going to get into certainly helped bring about enough talking points. So, without any further ado, obviously, the number one thing in college basketball, SEC basketball specifically, today is the news of Nate Oats' monster extension to stay at Alabama. It's going to run through 2029. It will make him the highest paid coach in college basketball without a Final Four appearance and the third highest paid coach in the SEC. That number is reported to be at $5 million annually with incentives laden throughout. Huge contract. It'll put him right behind Rick Barnes, I believe, as far as salaries go in college basketball. In the SEC specifically, Pearl is sitting at $5.4 million now. Barnes is sitting at 5.2. If this Oates contract comes out, it'll be coming out Friday. That's whenever the board of trustees will have their meeting to approve of this contract. So whenever the numbers are finalized, if that $5 million number is correct per John Rothstein's report, we're looking at the third highest paid coach in basketball, and as I said, in SEC basketball, and as I said prior, the highest paid coach in college basketball without a Final Four appearance. Uh, you know, three main takeaways from this extension. Number one, this extension was always going to be in the works for Alabama. Nate Oats' name was going to be hot this offseason. Early on, when it looked like Kentucky's season was spiraling, Oats was a guy that was reported to be among names to watch for Kentucky. Obviously, the Texas job, we're not sure if they're going to stick with Rodney Terry or not. I personally believe they should. He's done a great job this season with those guys. But Oates' name would be one that they would kick the tires on. And so for Alabama to keep Nate Oats in Tuscaloosa and not at a blue blood or at a school that was willing to shell out more money, they had to shell out money first. And the number one thing that this extension does is it raises Nate Oats' buyout to, we won't know it until it is finalized and reported, but what is currently a $9 million buyout, which was already enough to give a lot of programs pause if they were going to consider Nate Oats as a viable coaching candidate. Now, that number is going to be abhorrent, and it would take a blue blood with full funding and full support to go get Nate to be able to do so. Uh, and if you're gonna put everything you have, if North Carolina, let's say North Carolina, they're not gonna get rid of Hubert Davis anytime soon, I imagine. But let's just theoretically go about this. Let's say North Carolina wants Nate Oats. Obviously, if North Carolina is willing to pay a $15 to $20 million buyout and Nate Oats wants to go to a blue blood, it's gonna happen. But you at least make it to where North Carolina's going to have to pay a $15 to $20 million buyout, and your athletic department gets that money and puts it towards going to get a replacement. So this was critical for Alabama. This is critical for the fan base because a big concern that had been mounting and growing this season was, okay, we can enjoy this year, but what happens going forward? You know, our coach's name is going to be hot this offseason. What are we going to do about it? And Greg Byrne, the athletic director at Alabama, one of the best in the country, may very well be the best athletic director in the country, went ahead and locked Nate Oats up. And, the next thing is it says a lot to me about Nate Oats and his commitment to the Alabama basketball program and what he said in the past that he wants to build his own program and his own legacy and not just, fall in line at a blue blood and just be another guy. Uh, he meant it because obviously this extension could have been done in the off season. It could have been done after him flirting with other jobs. It could have been something that he intentionally waited, even if he didn't care to go to other jobs, but to run up a bidding war and make Alabama pay whatever the hell Alabama had to pay. But, here in the regular season, without this contract really getting out, no one knew anything about this extension until today, after it was announced yesterday that it would be on the table for Friday. So, in a 48-hour time periods, we've finally gotten word about this thing. But it's obviously been done if it's going to go to the Board of Trustees for approval. So, without any word of this contract getting out, Nate Oats signs it, agrees to it, Byrne writes it up, and it shows some commitment on Nate Oats' end to staying in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and continuing to build on the momentum of this program. And that's huge. That is incredibly huge because the third thing that it does is it proves that Alabama basketball is here to stay in the SEC. This isn't a flash in the pan. This isn't a 3-4 year run with an incredible coach that's on to a blue blood and Alabama backs off of basketball again. That's not what this is. You know, I wouldn't be surprised to hear some new words on Alabama's proposed new arena here soon after the season ends. It was scheduled to hear some bids for construction in April. Obviously, construction costs have gone up considerably since it was approved by the board. So there's kind of a waiting game going on, but obviously, if you're going to commit $5 million per year annually to your basketball coach for a 6-year extension, you're going to commit to building him the arena that is proposed. That is not a if, it is a when, and it will get done. It absolutely will. And, Alabama is second in the conference historically in wins. I mean, they've been a sleeping giant of a program for since the early 2000s. We're looking at 2 decades of Alabama kind of fumbling through mediocrity uh, until Nate Oats arrived. Of course, he inherited, a not at all empty shelf from Avery Johnson, the core group of Petty, Herb Jones, Kyra Lewis was still there, Alex Reese. Like, those were 4 guys that, were the foundation for Nate Oats' program, and he inherited them. So, obviously, Alabama wasn't this garbage fire of a program. They were on the bubble every year. They were just mediocrity personified. And Alabama was okay with it. But Alabama has shown now that they've got a winner at head coach. They're going to put the money behind them and they're going to dedicate themselves to winning. And that is a pretty scary proposition because you can expect Alabama to compete for SEC titles and be in the tournament just about every year going forward with Nate Oats at the helm. He's going to recruit his ass off. Obviously, you look at the freshman class that Alabama has propelling their success this year. The 23 class was never going to be as big. There's just so many guys returning for Alabama next year, which is so crazy to think about. But still put together a really solid class. And then this 24 class for Alabama on the horizon. Alabama is heavily involved with a lot of the very top guys in this class. So you can expect to continue to see Alabama heavily involved at the top of the SEC. And getting into the SEC as a whole, moving forward for the rest of this episode, I just wanted to kind of see where things are at mid-year compared to where we thought they would be preseason and kind of how we've gotten here. So, number one thing we thought preseason was the SEC would have a really strong year throughout the non-conference slate and into this first half of the SEC slate. That's kind of fallen by the wayside. Not every it seemed like the SEC was in a down year, and then the Big 12 SEC Challenge rolls around, and I don't want to sound any alarm bells, but the SEC is looking at what could possibly be a 9-bid league. This is about all the SEC can ask for at this point for what is considered a down year to have 9 teams in the conversation. I'll get into where they stack up in there, but that was a flip, a flop, and a flip again back to where we thought the SEC would be versus where they are. So as we look at it now, we got 4 teams that I believe are firmly in the field. Alabama and Tennessee both are competing for a 1 seed nationally. Tennessee's loss this Wednesday at Florida obviously didn't help them in their race for a number one seed. That probably puts them back firmly on the two line right now, but they've obviously got, 9 games left in the regular season to catch back up with what I imagine would be Kansas or Houston that took that last one seed and to get back on that one line. So you're looking at two contenders for a number one overall seed, which no one else in the country really has two legitimate contenders for a number one seed in their league, which is crazy. And then you're also looking at Auburn and Missouri. Both of those teams I view as firmly in the field. I use Bracket Matrix, which compiles just about, I think, 88 different sites that they find reputable enough for bracketology. And both Auburn and Missouri were single digit seeds, which was my qualifications for being firmly in the field. And then you look at the teams that are currently in, but they're not locks. You're looking at Arkansas and Kentucky. Both of those teams, as long as they don't shit the bed completely through the rest of the way and find, win the games they're supposed to, they'll be in. They don't need to prove anything. They just need to not disprove anything at this point. But then looking at the outside, looking in, you're looking at Mississippi State, Florida, and Texas A&M are all either in the first four, next four, or in consideration category. Mississippi State's the longest shot of the three. Florida and Texas A&M both stand some pretty healthy chances, and I just wanted to go ahead and start making the cases for those three teams. So, starting with A&M, who I believe is probably the best chance, but then again, I'm not sure. A&M and Florida both I go back and forth on, but looking at A&M, you're looking at a team that's 41st in KenPom, 48th in the net. You know what? I'm going to get really close to the mic when I tell you this. They fucked the net. It sucks now. The net sucks now. It really does. Whatever they did to the formula, fucked it. It's awful. Like, how is Tennessee ahead of Alabama in the net right now after losing at Florida? I understand that Alabama just lost at Oklahoma, but Tennessee has less quad one wins, more quad two loss. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, that's an aside. I could literally do an episode dedicated to why the net sucks now. I might, because I hate it that much. Anyway, 48th in the net. Their worst loss is at home to Wofford. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. That's a shitty loss. That is one that when you look at Selection Sunday and A&M is on the bubble, that's one that is going to be pointed to. And that's not that's not a loss that you want to carry into Selection Sunday. But their best win right now is at Auburn. Solid win. So long as Auburn continues to win their winnable games down the stretch, that's a win that you can hang your hat on. Their remaining schedule, I mean, they got plenty of opportunities against quality opponents to make or break their case. So let me actually pull up what their remaining schedule is right now. So they are currently sitting at 41 in KenPom, and here's the rest of their schedule. So they host Georgia, they host Auburn, they go on the road to LSU, they host Arkansas, they go on the road to Missouri, they host Tennessee, on the road to Mississippi State, on the road to Ole Miss, and hosting Alabama. What I see there, I see 3 easily winnable games against Georgia, LSU, and Ole Miss. Those are 3 bottom feeders in the conference. If you don't win those games, you don't deserve to be in the tournament. Those are 3 that you have to have. And then you're looking at a home game against Auburn. Winnable. Auburn hasn't played well on the road, so a season sweep of Auburn would do a lot for them. You got a home game against Arkansas. A lot of Arkansas depends on where Nick Smith Jr. lies. Is he going to be there? Is he not going to be there? Is he going to be there in a limited capacity? I don't know. That is the great equalizer right now in Fayetteville. And then you're looking at on the road at Missouri. That's a tough ask to win that one. But if you can, that's huge. Home to Tennessee. If you're ever going to beat Tennessee, you want to have them at home. And, Tennessee's a team that doesn't shoot the ball well. So if you can catch Tennessee on a really bad shooting night, oh, hello, Willa. That's my cat. She came to say hello. Okay. Let's say goodbye now, honey. This is Willa. Okay, goodbye. All right, so if you're ever going to beat Tennessee, getting them at home on an off shooting night, that's where you want to catch them. Then you go on the road to Mississippi State. That's if Mississippi State, we're going to get into them later, is still contending on the bubble. That could be a game with huge implications for the bubble. And then on the road at Ole Miss, like I said earlier, you've got to handle business on the road at Ole Miss. And then you catch Alabama at home. That, that's a statement right there. That it's not one that I'm expecting them to win. But if you can pull it off, that's a hell of a way to end your regular season. So their projected record with that schedule is 20-11. That's Ken Palm and Bart Torvik both agree on that. Looking at Bart Torvik, they have them at a 62% chance to make the tournament. And then looking at team rankings, they have them at a 53% chance to make the tournament. But this is what I find really, really, really interesting about this. Is they have them at a 80% chance to make it with 21 wins and a 45% chance to make it with 20. So, Ken Palm and Bart Torvik both have them with 20 wins finishing the season. So if you're looking at 20 wins to finish this season, maybe you can get a 21st in the regular season. That's huge. That might guarantee you getting in. And then you're looking at a win, maybe two in the conference tournament. That could be huge. This swing game away at Mississippi State, that could mean a hell of a lot to them. I mean, it's going to get interesting. It has the potential to get really interesting for these three teams on the bubble in the SEC. Then moving on to Florida, we've got them at ranked 36th per KenPom. They're ranked 41st by the net, and they're 59th in RPI. Their worst loss is Oklahoma on a neutral site. That's something that Oklahoma with a win over Alabama, that's something that if you're looking at resumes down the stretch, Oklahoma's got the win head-to-head over Florida. They've also got a win over Alabama. That's one that if it comes down to two spots, Oklahoma on a neutral site, that's a tough loss for another team that's looking to be on the bubble. But let's say Oklahoma gets themselves squarely in, goes on a bit of a run here down the stretch in the Big 12. There's a real chance that that's another quality opponent. Because Florida's losses are all to pretty quality opponents. Let's see, who am I looking at here? I'm looking at A&M. Let me get this back over to Florida real quick. So Florida, we're looking at. Oh, I misspoke earlier. They're 38th per KenPom, not 36. Look at their losses. There's really Oklahoma being your worst loss is a really good loss, but we've got a close, literally a one possession loss to FAU. That's a tournament team. A neutral site loss to Xavier. They're a top 4 seed. A neutral site loss to West Virginia. West Virginia is bad in Big 12 play, so I'm tempted to say that they're the worst loss, but then again, looking at ratings based metrics, West Virginia is still they're ranked 19th per KenPom right now. So it's hard to really call that an awful loss. They got drummed by UConn, but a lot of teams have. That Oklahoma loss, and they've got a road loss at Auburn, a home loss to A&M. That could be huge down the line. They lost a road trip to A&M, both of them one possession games. Those could be huge down the line. And then Kansas State handled them pretty well, but Kansas State's handled a lot of teams really well. So, looking at Florida's remaining schedule. Oh, wait, let me go back to their best win if I'm going to talk about their worst loss. Obviously, their best win came Wednesday night against Tennessee at home. That's a win you hang your hat on. That's a trump card on the bubble type of win. Especially if Tennessee is able to find their way back to the 1 seed line. Going into Selection Sunday with a win against the number 1 seed, That means a lot. That means quite a lot. But looking at their remaining schedule, see, we've got Kentucky on the road this Saturday. They go on the road to Alabama. Then they play host to Vanderbilt. They host Ole Miss. They go on the road to Arkansas. They host Kentucky. They go on the road to Vanderbilt, on the road to Georgia, and home with LSU. Obviously, road games in conference aren't easy, but whenever you've got Vanderbilt and Georgia on the road is a bubble team, you've got to win those. And these are, basement dweller teams in the conference. I mean, they get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games against basement level teams in the conference. They get Vanderbilt twice, Ole Miss, Georgia, and LSU once. You've got to win those 5. If you don't win those 5, you got to pick up some other games. But those are 5 that they've got to win. What would be huge for them is if they can split with Kentucky. Let's say they lose on the road, but they pick up a win against Kentucky at home. That one could go a long way for them. Let's just say they win those 5 easy ones. They pick up their home win against Kentucky, and then they finish the season with 1 loss to Arkansas, 1 loss to Alabama, and 1 loss to Kentucky, all on the road. That's one hell of a resume. KenPom's got them projected to finish at 18-3. Bart Torvik agrees. They've got a 61% chance to make the tournament per Bart Torvik. And then using team rankings, they've got a 42% chance. Team rankings has them at 20% chance with 18 wins and 19 with 67. So same thing with Texas A&M here is that one extra win can really do a lot for them. But even at the same time, if they finish that regular season with 18 wins, they string 2 of them together in the tournament. That could mean a lot for Florida. That could really help their chances on the bubble. So Florida is another team that, they've got no bad losses. Like Oklahoma or West Virginia being your worst loss is not bad to carry. They just got to make sure that stays that way. They can't drop a game to Vandy, a game to Ole Miss, a game to Georgia, and a game to LSU. They can't drop any of those. So moving on to the longest shot of the 3, Mississippi State. There's been times where Mississippi State has been a Jekyll and Hyde act. I mean, going into conference play, they were ranked in the top 25. Before their last non-conference game, they were undefeated. But then they started getting hammered in conference play. I mean, they were getting trounced in conference play, and it looked like their season was dead in the water. I mean, look at this. I mean, they go their loss at Drake to start the season, to start their slide right before conference play. They lose to Alabama at home, and then they lose to Tennessee on the road. Obviously, not 2 games they were expected to win at all. They beat Ole Miss at home, and then bam, here starts a slide. Lost to Georgia on the road, lost to Auburn on the road, you lost to Tennessee at home, you lost to Florida at home, and you lost to Alabama on the road. But then they turn around and beat TCU at home in the SEC Big 12 Challenge, and that was a life raft for Mississippi State. That win completely changed the trajectory of their season. They have a chance to save it now. They have a chance to make the dance. It's not a great chance. Not at all. But it's a chance. And if they can win a couple of these games down this road, I might like it. I might like their chance because, I mean, let's look at this. I mean, their worst loss is on the road to Georgia. Obviously, not a good loss at all. But you turn around, obviously, Drake on a neutral floor isn't a good loss either, but it's not the worst loss. But you look at wins against Marquette on a neutral floor, TCU at home, those are 2 really big wins. Those are teams that are projected to be 2 and 3 seeds right now. I mean, those are 2 potentially huge wins. And like I said, the remaining schedule, I mean, they've got some real chances. I mean, they've got 4 games that they have to win. They absolutely have to win these 4. I mean, you've got to beat LSU at home. You've got to beat Ole Miss on the road. You've got to beat South Carolina at home. And you've got to beat Vandy away. These are basement dweller teams. Obviously, when you're playing Ole Miss, it's a rivalry game. They're not wanting to get swept by their in-state rival. I mean, they're a team playing with nothing to lose. Kermit Davis is coaching knowing that he's out of a job right now. That's one that, I never want to say that one's easy because it's a rivalry game, but it better be easy if you want to make the tournament. But other than those four, should be wins, got to have it wins. They've got a home game against Missouri coming up on Saturday. That one could momentum's a huge thing in college basketball, and getting a third win in the row, beating a tournament team in Missouri, that could really keep this ball rolling for Mississippi State, especially whenever you consider they've got LSU at home right after. That's a 4-game run that they can go on right there. On the road at Arkansas, probably not walking out of there with the win. They got a less than 30% chance to win that game per KenPom. They host Kentucky. You might have a shot there. You kind of need to take that shot with where they stand on the bubble. I mean, they're in consideration territory, not first four, next four. I mean, they're in consideration territory. So you've got to win that game. And then you go on the road to Missouri. You're probably not taking that road game. You host Texas A&M. That one could be big time for you. You almost have to have that. And then they finish it with their home game against South Carolina and a road trip to Vanderbilt. KenPom's got them projected at 19-12. I believe Bart Torvik has them at 19-12 as well. Yes, they do. Their best chance to make the tournament is at 32.4% per Bart Torvik. I see a path. I do. But it's gonna take them having to win every single winnable game. I'm not calling on the road at Arkansas winnable. I'm not calling on the road at Missouri winnable. But if you get out of conference play with those two as your only losses down the stretch, you've got a shot. You've got a real shot, especially if you can contend in the SEC tournament. There's something there. But getting into the SEC regular season standings before we wrap this up. So, in the race for the regular season title, Alabama's undefeated conference record has given them a 2-game cushion on the 3-way tie for second. Those 3 teams, we've got Tennessee, A&M, and Auburn. All 3 of them are sitting at 7-2 in conference play. And then right behind them, what I would consider the long shots with a chance, you've got Kentucky and Florida. Both at 6-3 in conference play, so 3 games back of the lead. Anything can happen, but they're probably out of it. But I'll give it to them right now. The race for the crown is gonna be determined by how Alabama plays. Obviously, they're playing with house money. Doesn't matter what Tennessee, Auburn, and A&M do, so long as Alabama handles business. But they're all going to have their shot at Alabama, and in pretty favorable ways. I mean, Auburn's the only one that's got to play Alabama at home, but I mean, Auburn's the only one that has to play Alabama in Coleman, at Auburn. Ugh. Disregard. Alabama and Auburn play a home and home through the rest of conference play. So Auburn's looking at the best case scenario. They get to. I mean, I'm completely losing it. Okay, Auburn is looking at an opportunity to get Alabama at home, but they're Alabama's best chance to get a win as well because they host Auburn. But then Alabama has a road trip, one off to A&M to end the season, and they have a road trip to Tennessee right after their road trip to Auburn. So all 3 of A&M, Auburn, and Tennessee get to have a real shot at Alabama because they play them at home. And Alabama's got to make the road trips. Obviously, winning on the road in college basketball in conference, not easy. Alabama hasn't lost a road conference game, obviously, because they're undefeated in conference play, but they just lost on the road to Oklahoma. But Alabama's got road wins at Houston. That's a pretty damn hostile environment. They got a road win at Arkansas. That's a pretty damn hostile environment as well. I mean, they don't get rattled on the road, so beating them, even when you are at home, is tough. But I mean that stretch of games right there, that 4 game stretch, home and away with Auburn, away at Tennessee, and away at A&M. I mean, those could really determine if any of these second place teams get a shot at this thing, or it could easily go ahead and crown Alabama halfway through. Should Alabama use their mulligans and they drop 2 games, I mean, this race for the SEC crown could get messy. I mean, depending on how it happens, I mean, Tennessee and Auburn still have to play. I believe. I believe Auburn still plays. I mean, there's a lot of wacky shit that can happen. So we're far from over in the SEC title race. I think we'll get more clarity should Alabama go to Auburn and Tennessee in back-to-back games, February 11th and February 15th, and come out with wins. That essentially puts it to bed. But a lot of basketball left to be played. So I'll go ahead and close it out here. I'm not sure exactly when I'll be doing the next episode here. I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure when I'll have enough content to do one. I want to start doing some just videos, one-offs for the Alabama games that I go to. Obviously, we're there. We go. The hard hat, right there, right there. So I'm a student at UA right now. Obviously, I try and keep my biases aside, but I know Alabama basketball. I'm more familiar with it than any of the other teams just because I watch every single game live and then I watch it again. I get enough time to watch just about every other SEC game except for the basement teams. I don't bother watching them. I'm going to be honest. They're not worth my time. But, I'm thinking about starting some content where I just record my experiences at those games. I'm looking at making the trip to Tennessee on February the 15th. I think that one could make for a fun little piece of content. But we'll see where we end up. When's the next time I turn this microphone on? But it was a pleasure having you listening to my ramblings. Hope to see you again next time. Have a good one.